right, welcome to Real Men Iowa. We are talking today about pornography, and the three of us that are here today, let me get the right number. The three of us are all our pastors, and I can tell you from my experience, and I'll throw this to you guys next. Probably the number one thing I hear from people as far as struggling is pornography, whether it be men struggling with pornography or wives struggling with their husbands who are struggling with pornography. That's just been a huge issue over the past few years, and we're going to talk about it today. And hopefully we can get some good counsel. We don't want to just say quit it, and but how get some help. Hopefully that's what our conversation is going to be about. What are you guys at on this whole thing?
Well, let me start off by saying this: this was a major struggle in my own life for a long time, and I even after I got married, even as I was a student at Bible college, this was an arena of a struggle in my life, and it's something that it took accountability, it took the Word of God, it took a loving, caring wife who truly became my help in this arena of lust and helping me be the man that God was calling me to be. And so, and I want to kind of unpack a lot of that stuff, but I can tell you that porn is something that impacts men more than we can ever even realize. And our culture now is so different with the availability and accessibility of pornography.
Oh, it's everywhere. Yeah,
it is.
Whether you want it or not, you don't even have to look for it. It looks for you.
I remember being a very young kid, and when I saw my very first pornographic image, and it was a magazine that me and a kid named Eric Seaman looked at behind a Zippy Mart in Cocoa, Florida, and we were standing behind there, just kind of going through the pages. And even to this day, I'm 45 years old. Even to this day, I can recall the images if I want to, And so it's that's how seared that stuff becomes in your soul and in your brain when you see that stuff and what it does to your heart.
Scientifically, actually, it creates grooves in the hemisphere, in the frontal lobe. And that's kind of an interesting, just understanding and awareness that I came to here recently was you're creating habitual just kind of reactions anytime that you see that at an early age that lead you into your adult age. And then the interesting thing is it continues to it's passed down through the generations. With what you're experienced to and exposed to early on, it actually transcends to your younger generations. So there's a lot of scientific things to this, and part of that comes from a series that we'll refer to later. But I'm like you, Mike, where pornography has had its claws in my own life before. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned three things, if I can piggyback off of what you said. You said accountability was one of them. What were the other two?
Accountability, the Word of God, and my wife, who truly became a help to me in this arena.
And I would submit that I think before all of those, it starts with attitude. It starts with decision. You have to really kind of consciously make a decision to declare war on porn in your own life.
Yeah.
And then those resources come in. But until you want to aggressively attack this sin, let's just call it what it is, in your own home, in your own life, all of those resources by themselves really aren't going to contribute to a successful battle plan. Mm-hmm. I think it begins with attitude.
I would like to, Dan, if you're okay with this, I want to share some statistics on pornography and how its impact is felt in our culture. 90% of children ages 8 to 16, 90%.
That's our children.
Yeah.
Sometimes you put here a stat. Oh man, that's awful. It's like, no, these are your kids.
Yeah,
these are my kids.
90% of children ages 8 to 16 have viewed porn.
What's the site that you're referring to?
This comes from a site called churchmagazine.org.
Okay.
So,
just as a reference point, I think that's good for our audience to hear.
The largest consumers of pornography are 12 to 17-year-old boys.
Makes sense.
This one makes this was kind of hard to wrap my mind around. Porn sites comprise 12% of the internet. Mm-hmm. That's huge.
Wow.
When you start thinking about the internet, how big it is.
12%.
12%. 70% of men ages 18 to 34 visit a porn site in a typical month.
How many? Did you say 70%?
70%
Of men. What age?
ages 18 to 34 visit a porn site in a typical month.
Another statistic is 68% of men in churches regularly view porn, and that's according to ConquerorSeries.com.
Wow.
25% of search engine requests are for porn. That's a quarter of all search engine requests are for porn. 50% of pastors regularly look at
50%?
porn. Yes, 50%. Half of all pastors regularly look at porn. 38% of adults say porn is morally acceptable. And then here's some these ones are every second. Listen to this. Every second, 28,258 people in the United States view porn. Every second.
Man.
In the United States.
In the United States. And every minute in the United States, $184,500 is spent on porn every minute in the United States. That's not worldwide. And here's something interesting. 1 in 6 women struggle with porn addiction.
Yep. Yep.
So, and those are just a few stats. But,
So we're taking a small child into a candy store saying, now, don't think about it, don't look at it, don't have any candy. As pastors, that's where we're at. And we're the candy store owner. Well, but that's going a bit far in the illustration. But, I mean, half of us are doing it too.
Right.
That's a daunting, and it'd be interesting to know. Maybe some of you guys know this. Maybe like how many of these guys that are in the church actively doing it are wanting out, and how many have accepted it as norm.
Right.
I think another question I would wonder, because we talked about politics last week, and one of the things I talked about was that pastors don't ever breach this topic. It seems like of political discussions from the pulpit. What about porn? How many pastors ever even address the subject of porn, or even say the word porn from the pulpit?
From the pulpit especially, and this is going way back in my very first placement in ministry, I was challenged by the leadership to not talk about it with our high school students, with our high school men. And I can tell you all kinds of victory stories that I've seen God just kind of unleash and take bondage off of men in the 15 years I've been doing ministry. But it began in Illinois. And while I was in Illinois, we had a group of about 12 boys who were 16 to 18. They were struggling through this, and through the relationship that we had developed, a couple of them had come to me just really broken over this issue. And so we started an accountability group. That's when I first got connected with Craig Gross and the ministry XXXchurch.com, which is an amazing resource, and they have all kinds of practical aids for men. But it began right around that time frame where I was in Illinois. And the 3 or 4, it started to swell to about 12. We had about a dozen guys who would meet every Monday night, and we would talk about, how are you doing? And we wore rubber bands on our wrist as an indicator, so you wouldn't have to ask the awkward questions. And if the rubber band were gone, then you knew that you had a failure. You had, you had fallen to temptation.
Like you wore those all the time, or just to that group?
The rubber band was a visible example. Hey, I'm doing okay.
So like during the week, they see each other at school or something.
Yeah.
They go, okay.
Hey, he's got his rubber band.
I need to.
And if they took the rubber band off, then it was an indication. Okay, I'm going to pray for him. Hey, it's all right. And then every Monday night, the ones who didn't get, who had to take their rubber bands off, we would give new rubber bands to. Because tonight we're going to start again. And so it was just kind of a cool, hey, you can do this. And one day turned into 2 days, turned into 7 days, turned into a month. And it was just amazing to see some of these victories happen. But it was about accountability. But
their wives thank you right now for that.
Actually, I still am in contact with a lot of those guys. But the interesting thing is the church leadership found out that this was happening and said, you have no business doing this with the kids.
It was not
even in my.
It's such a goofy.
But that's kind of how Craig's story started at XXX Church.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know his story or not, but it was very similar. I mean, he was kind of doing the same sort of thing, and I don't know about the rubber band thing, but they were meeting and his church leadership and you're talking early 2000s.
Yeah.
It was the white elephant in the pew, and that's kind of where I don't know if you've heard about that idea. But since 2002, Craig would bring a huge white elephant. I mean, this thing was
pink.
Oh, pink.
Yeah, it was a pink elephant.
Yes. and you would blow it up on the church.
Right.
And that's when, hey, we're going to talk about the pink elephant in the pew.
I love it.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about it quite a bit over the years in preaching series. I just had a series recently, breaking free from bondage type of thing, and that was one of the topics.
Yeah.
And I know early on we've lost a few families over that because they just didn't think we should be talking about it. I'm like, well then stop doing it. I'll stop talking about it. you know. So that's crazy to me that people wouldn't want to hear about what people are honestly struggling with.
Well, I think it's such a, it's such a dark place anyway, and so anytime light exposes darkness,
Preach.
darkness flees naturally.
Yeah.
It just has to.
And that's I think one of the things that I found with the shame factor and all that stuff that goes into porn and ministering to guys that are struggling with porn is that when a guy is able to actually for the first time bring this out into the light, and even if it's
Right.
just that first initial conversation with his pastor
Yeah.
or with another guy, hey, this is like something I struggle with. There are so many barriers that are broken down just by that very act. I mean, it's like Satan's still can have a hold, but his grip loosens, and
Absolutely.
and it's an incredibly powerful thing when you confess something. The scriptures attest to that. When we confess our sins, that there is a release, there is forgiveness, and there is hope in that act. And so I don't know. I think that's a powerful thing when you're able to do that. And one of the other sides of this, and I remember ministering to one guy, and when I took him through, we can talk about curricula, I guess, as we go through this, but one of the ones that kind of been the standalone for a long time is Every Man's Battle, and they've got a whole series, Every Man's curriculum, and it's
Right.
good stuff, and I've utilized it in ministry, a long time. And I know one of the co-authors, Fred Stoker, by the way, he's a great guy, he lives close by in Ankeny. I remember taking one guy through Every Man's Battle, and we got, we were more than halfway through just going through this and meeting regularly, weekly. And his wife, all she knew is that we were meeting for Bible study.
Yeah.
And he never found the courage to tell his wife. And even though every week I would encourage him to do it, he never was able to find the courage to do that. And I know to this day he still struggles with this. And that the sad thing is that he felt like, well, if I do this, what she might do. And I think that's what Satan used in his life to keep him, held back in bondage.
Okay, let's look at the flip side of that. Okay, because I've also know people who've struggled with it, and one of their first steps was to tell their wife, and they ended up divorced. Okay, so I've struggled with telling someone, you need to tell your wife. I thought, well, let's get this under control. I mean, somewhere in there is the package, but at what point do you tell the wife?
Well, anytime that you bring a standard and you bring it to a certain situation, I think that you're in dangerous water. So I think each situation kind of has its
Gotta
own
read
kind of
it, yeah.
customized, unique situation. There are variables in everyone's marriage that we're not ever going to be privy to, regardless of whether it's in our own local congregations
Right.
or whether it's even on this internet broadcast. So I think that we have to be really careful with what advice we do give, because each situation is so unique that we're not going to know all the variables. I think if it's appropriate and if it's something that, man, it would be very healthy, obviously that's something that you should seek counsel from your own minister and see, because they're going to know your situations better than we are. But
If his wife is a supportive type
if
person
they're a
who's
believer,
a forgiving person.
But there's so many if-then conversations,
yeah.
Dan. And
Yeah.
for me, that's where, approach somebody that you know and that you trust, that know your situation well, and speak to your advice,
Right.
and give advice to you. I know men who have chosen to not share, and I know men who have chosen to share. And the ones who have not shared with their wives, they have a tight network of other men who they're able to bounce and be accountable for. I myself, I did what you did, Mike. I shared it with my own wife, and it happened very early in our marriage. I think part of it was I was deceived as a young boy, thinking, man, this is a struggle now, but when I'm married, everything's going to be okay. And
because then you get to do the real thing.
yeah,
and
and
you'll
everything
never even
wasn't
care.
okay.
Yeah.
And I think the danger and elusiveness of porn is that it deceives you to believe that self-stimulation, masturbation is it's all about you, and then it teaches you that sex is all about you, but it's not. And that's
Right.
the major danger of all of this, is that sex is uniquely created for two people never created for one person. You know, it's not about you getting your rocks off or her getting her rocks off. It's about you coming together to intimately. That's the real kind of.
Well, my take, honestly, on this would be, that I believe in, especially for a married individual, that the whole approach of and I've had, I don't know that I've ever had a gal leave a guy because of that, but I know that when he revealed his struggles, it created like almost like an affair, and in a sense, it is.
Yeah,
it is an affair.
And so it was a very difficult thing for her to overcome, because she had kind of lived in a false narrative for a really long time, and so she kind of, it's kind of like the sixth sense thing when you go back and you have to watch the movie again, like, oh man, all of that stuff that you did, then that means that wasn't true, and and so that's how she feels, in a sense, is she feels betrayed, and so she has to go back through her history and realizing that there's so many lies, so much deceit, and it's a real hard thing for a wife. But I still believe, and I would say this firmly, that this is in my ministry approach. I believe that if we are going to be pastoring and shepherding men, especially married men, that our approach is not them as an individual; it's them as a man in their family and the leader over their family. And a man cannot lead his wife if he is not completely transparent with her.
I 100% agree with you, and I think in every situation, the utopian situation is that the husband's completely transparent about this issue. Mm-hmm. But every situation is not there yet. There's just some men who are not at that level of maturity, and there are some women.
I acknowledge that. I agree with that. Yeah. But I think that the goal, in my opinion, would be always to be prodding and moving these men to a place where your marriage can be, whole, and your marriage can be a wonderful thing. People, what I've found, people approach sex in either two ways. They see sex as gross, or they see it as a gift. And I think that, or maybe a third way, they make it a god, little g. I know for me, because of pornography, that I kept it in the gross category for a long time.
Wait, the pornography or sex?
Kept sex. Okay. Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Well, no, I just wanted to.
I kept sex in that gross category. So the idea of actually sex becoming a act of worship, sex becoming something that I could pray with my wife before and after, was like a foreign concept to me, because pornography had damaged us. And that's what pornography does to men, is it physically damages a guy, so that sex it's something that's really hard to actually be stimulating for a man. I'm talking about physical sex, the act of. And it distorts the view of the woman for a man, because his wife can never live up to that standard of airbrushed, photoshopped women. And it also distorts the spiritual nature of sexuality for a man. It makes him believe that, like I said, it's either going to be a God thing, little g, or it's a gross thing. And that's kind of where I was stacked in. And it's really hard for couples to overcome that if there has been pornography inundating the relationship, either through the guy or both.
Here's a struggle I've often seen played out, and I'm sure you guys have too, where a couple comes in and they're struggling with this. So it's come out in the conversation, and what has happened somewhere down the line, there was an argument, there was a disagreement, something, and the wife started holding back. And then the husband started justifying, well, if I'm not getting it here, I'll get it there.
Exactly.
And then she finds out, and now she holds it back more. And that's this continual circular thing of they're not satisfying each other. And the whole thing's out of whack.
Because they're trying to satisfy themselves.
Exactly.
And it's all about
It's
all about self-stimulation. And that's the erosion and danger of pornography. And that's where, like James chapter 5:16, I believe it is, and I don't have it in front of me, but it says, if any of you are sick, confess your sins to one another, so that you might be made whole and be made well. And that verse changed everything for me when it came to this conversation, because now when I'm in the struggle of porn, I'm gonna call one of those accountability guys. I'm gonna reach out to one of them through a text, and I'm going to say, I'm praying for you. Not, hey, pray for me. I'm going to say, I'm praying for you. And what that tells them and what it tells Satan is he's not going to get us both. And it's starting to retrain my mind to think sex is not about me. Sex is about her. Sex is about my wife. Sex is about us together. But if I say in those temptations to my fellow comrades, hey, pray for me, then I'm telling him and I'm training myself that sex is all about me. And so there becomes, not only is Satan going to lose against me, he's going to lose against me and my buddy. And then I know that my buddy's going to pray for me too.
Here's an issue on accountability that I've seen through the years, and I even saw it in my life in a little bit, is that when you find somebody to be accountable to, I would say that it probably needs to be, frankly, more than one person.
Oh, yeah.
But if it is just one person, because a lot of that's where most guys start, I just need to find a guy to confess to or whoever. Make sure that person is truly a somebody that's spiritually in a good place.
Right.
Because I have seen it play out where guys just simply kind of cry on each other's shoulders how they fail.
Yeah. And then
they
they kind of
don't
justify
ever move
it.
past that. It's like, oh, brother, I understand.
You failed, I did too.
Yeah.
Well, man.
You ever leaned on a dead tree in the woods?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to lean on a tree that's pretty stable.
Exactly.
And that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that, that accountability approach, there is no victory in the struggle of porn. Let me say this ashamedly and
Unfiltered.
clearly. There is no victory in the struggle of porn for any person if you do not have accountability.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. So that'd probably be an action step number one.
Yes.
Find accountability.
Yes.
Because, we everybody's already feeling guilty, right? Like they're all listening to this going, yeah, I know, yeah, you're right. So let's help them out. So accountability is what we've been talking about. Decision
number one.
Yep.
And then I would say accountability. And in that accountability feature or element, the variable is your wife is kind of a wild card. That's the utopian.
Yeah.
That's an eventual. That's a hope, but maybe not right now.
And I would say this to a guy that would be watching this, and maybe you're the guy that has never confessed this struggle to anybody. You've never. It's wrong. You've been struggling with this. You look at porn almost daily, and you want to be better in Christ, but you've never confessed this. And I'm going to put it out there for myself, for Steve, for Dan. Even if you are scared to talk to your pastor, private message one of us on Facebook and just say, this is where I'm at.
Because there's freedom in declaration.
Yeah, you need to do that, and I'm telling you, it's the first step and it's the best step. Just genuinely get it out there. We're telling you, we've struggled with this ourselves.
Right.
This has been something that we've had to deal with in our own
We're not sitting up on a high mountain saying,
Yes.
I don't understand. How could you have such thoughts?
What is happening?
But
So-
this is I'm just saying, get it out there, confess, and then we can kind of direct you from that point. We can help you get into the right path. Maybe we're not your pastor, that's fine. Just start somewhere. You've got to start. You've got to get that out there. And I just want to say that to that guy that's never confessed that. This is the deal. This is the time, and I hope that you're being convicted to do so.
Yeah. I was digging around before the show on the triplechurch.com. That's a great resource.
XXX Church.
What did I say?
Triple Church.
I say it wrong every time. triplexchurch.com.
And that's Craig Gross that we referred to earlier.
Exactly. They're doing a 30-day challenge to get out of porn. You sign up, you give them so I signed up. I thought, I want to know what, if we're going to talk about it, what is this, right? So they take your first name and your email.
Yeah.
And I've already got my first email saying, hey, we're going to send you an email every day. Welcome to the challenge. Yada, yada.
And they have an accountability software.
Yes.
That is called X3 Watch. That's amazing. I've used it for over a decade now.
Yeah.
And what you do is you just type in someone's email that you trust, and maybe this is that accountability partner that you've identified. For me personally, it's him and my wife, so they see it, and it's on all of my digital features in my home.
So it goes on your computer, your iPad,
there's
your
a
phone,
subscription for phones and iPads and stuff.
Okay.
But
there is a free
There is a
base.
free one for like desktops and laptops, and,
Right.
and I think that's a kind of more limited. But
Because guys are sneaky. They'll find a way.
absolutely. And we're not going to tell you how to turn X3 off because it doesn't. You can't turn X3 Watch off.
Nice.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Anyway, so with that said, you type in the emails, and then they are given a report that you decide, is it every 2 weeks, or is it every month? And it will send a report to that computer, to that email, saying, hey, these are questionable sites. And it's actually been a huge resource for our family. Without going into the whole narrative with our own context of home, what it ended up doing is creating conversations with my own children at home. And so that's another realm that I hope that we're able to talk about. Maybe that's another session. Maybe that's even in today's session. but how do you handle this situation with your sons and with your daughters?
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. We didn't bring this up in the part where we talked about raising godly boys, but one of the things that I told my sons, Jonathan and Jacob, I told them this. I said, because I told them my story of the very first time I looked at a pornographic magazine, and I shared that with them. And I said, my hope is for you, because it's going to happen. There's going to be that day when you're just like minding your own business, and you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden there's somebody throwing out a porn magazine or
I've found one
like
on the
that.
street before.
Yeah, and
Yep,
I mean,
yep.
it's there, and there's nobody around, and it's just you. My hope as a dad is train you for that moment, so that you'll be ready, because you're going to be so tempted to look, and I want you to just know, no, I don't need to see that crap, and just walk on, and that is my goal. And I think that a lot of dads don't even put any kind of investment into wanting to prepare their sons for that.
No, there's really 4 different approaches that we've observed, that my wife and I have observed with other families in this conversation. Mum's the word. We're not going to talk about it. It's that gross factor. Because sex and porn are gross, or even it's that audience member in our churches that when you start talking about it, they're so ashamed and so embarrassed, they're leaving because we're not exposing darkness at all, which I understand. I get that. I'm sensitive to that. But mum's the word. That's one style. The other is you're going to have the talk. And the talk is dad has a conversation with sons, and it usually just happens one time, and it's as awkward as all get out.
Yeah.
And for me, I had the talk when I was 14. Dad put me in the truck, and he said, "Do you want to drive?" "Yeah, I'd love to drive." So I'm driving this 5-speed down the road. I get in 5th gear, and Dad goes, "So, birds and the bees." And I remember going, "Oh, what the hell?" What's going on, Dad? I'm thinking on 2 levels. That's really awesome. I'm glad that was a good strategy, because now I can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
2, I don't want to have this conversation when I'm learning how to drive. So I said, "Yeah, you know about it. Yeah, you know not to do it before you're married. Yeah, okay. Oh, I'm
we
glad
had this
that's
talk."
over." And that's the talk.
So now you avoid any stick shift vehicle.
No, I love
It
stick
brings up
shifts.
painful memories.
I've gone to counseling. I'm good.
I take a shower.
So it's mum's the word, the talk, or the trip. James Dobson made this really popular in the 90s, where dad take your sons out in the woods, and moms take your daughters out on a shopping trip. But the unfortunate thing that we've seen with that is what happens, or the conversation that happens in the woods stays in the woods. And you don't really bring that back. And I think the 4th one, which is one that my wife and I have endorsed and embraced, is the conversation. We just talk about it openly. We've talked about what the penis is and what the vagina is from the time that they were younger. No, I'm serious. Instead of calling it the wee-wee and all that.
Yeah,
and the flower.
Only reason I'm laughing is because I had a.
Well, I'm serious. There's some weird names for those things.
I had a friend that's a pastor in Indiana that they did the very similar thing when their kids were little. And the problem was that their son went around to everybody in church pointing, "You have a penis."
Oh, yeah.
You have a vagina."
Yeah. That happened with my oldest son, Joe. We had a guest speaker in, and he was black. He was like 6'6", 300. I mean, the guy was just huge, played professional football. And he asked that question to him. You can ask him. His name's Chris Brown, and he just died laughing. So you do get some awkward conversations from your kids if you do the conversational style.
Yeah.
But the reward of it, now that our kids, like Madison's almost 17, Joe's almost 16, and our youngest is 11, almost 12. I mean, it's just, we've had some very healthy conversations about what porn is and what porn isn't, about what sex is and what sex isn't. And it's not awkward. I think moms and dads set the stage for that awkward. But at the same time, it's their choice. They can choose which of those 4 they want to do. There's no judgment, no condemnation. I've just seen that those are the approaches.
Kind of a combination of all. I could see being well. You can't.
No, you
find
can't.
all of them, but I mean,
No, there is no.
there's not none and all.
We probably didn't do the conversation thing, but we definitely did the trip thing.
Sure.
And my father-in-law and I took my sons. I described this in our one when we talked about raising godly boys, but we took them out to Dubuque, Iowa, actually, to a really nice place, and had a water park, indoor water park, and it was a great weekend. We used his CD set called "Preparing for Adolescence,"
And Passport to Purity is another.
And so I mean, that's kind of, but more than just that. And like what I talked about with that weekend was that I wanted to give them a clear mark of you're not a boy anymore.
Right.
You're moving into.
You're
manhood.
arriving.
Yeah, and so I wanted to give that kind of demarcation. Kind of a bar mitzvah. Almost in a sense.
The circumcision.
Well, it's not like you
I'm
stop
just
talking.
kidding. I'm just kidding, Mike.
I got a pair of scissors here. It's not like you stopped talking about it altogether afterward, though.
Exactly.
And
right,
some people
exactly.
would. I think that's what you're.
Yeah, and so
you know.
I mean, I guess it's a blend, maybe, you know, but we
Between the
definitely-
trip and conversation.
Yeah. That's what I meant by the all.
Well, and the thing about the conversation is, don't get the wrong idea. I don't think that you start right out of the womb, hey, guys, let's talk about sex. I don't think that that's what happens. But I think that there's an old story about a boy who came off the bus and he said, Mommy, what's sex? And they had planned to do the whole conversation thing, you know, not veil anything, kind of be very open. And she was like, oh, she starts to panic. He's supposed to be here. Where's my husband? You know, so she decides to just keep her cool and here's what sex is. And she explains everything from a scientific perspective and, you know, the sperm and the egg and, you know, babies. And then she said, so do you have any other questions, little Johnny? And Johnny said, well, yeah, just one. Do I indicate M or F on my soccer form? You know, and sometimes in the conversations, you have to know the context for the question.
Right.
And you don't want to just unpack everything. I don't know if this
So
is
was
what
that
we're
an
going
M?
for or not today. But
Yeah.
M? I'm confused. But there is
man.
such a danger with pornography. I mean, it's got its claws and its teeth into so many of our men in the church. And if you think that you're alone, you're wrong. That's, I think, for me, the number one thing that we want to make sure that we communicate today is that you're not alone in this struggle, and you're not alone in the battle. You don't have to be. You can choose to be alone in the battle, but you don't have to be.
Right.
So tell us about this video curriculum you were.
Yeah, conquerorseries.com. If you're in ministry and you're a ministry leader and you want to check that out, that's a tremendous resource that I found. I think it's a wonderful and just kind of cinematography effort to expose the enemy's battle plan so that we can have a strategic counter plan to what Satan's trying to do. Because I think that if Satan continues to have his heyday in this realm for men, then our men will never arrive to where they're called to be. And it's never too late to be who God's designed you to be.
Yep.
And so part of that is just knowing what your sword is, knowing what your strategy is, knowing who your enemy is, knowing what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Because, you know, when you stop and think about some of the iconic verses on this subject in the scriptures, David and Bathsheba, it says in the springtime when kings go to war, you know, David wasn't where he was supposed to be. So when do you struggle with porn? It's probably when you're staying up too late and you should really be in bed. But it's those simple strategy points and communication efforts, and sometimes it's as simple as turning the phone off at night. Sometimes it's at 9:30. Everyone's going to put all of their phones on the basket on the counter, and no one's going to touch them. And that could be an easy, simple strategy for dads to communicate to their sons as they're having these conversations.
Right. And
But if you're alone as a dad, your son's alone.
Right. And I would add that I've had parents in my church that I've ministered to that have had, you know, their kids be able to have a laptop in their room,
Yeah.
you know, by
Poison.
themselves, you know, or, you know, a TV
It's
in the
just-
room that's hooked up to, you know, whatever. And I just,
It's
without,
a breeding ground for the enemy.
It is. It's you know, and not just that. I mean, but if you have a smartphone and your child has a smartphone and like you're describing, and they're able to go off anywhere by themselves. I mean, to be frank, I mean, I don't want to get too graphic, but I mean, frankly, there were periods during my young boys' lives where we would not let them have an electronic device in the bathroom.
Right.
You know, just no, you know, just leave it outside the door, you know, and we didn't want to give them the opportunity to fall.
Right.
Because you'll be drawn to that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in high school, we had HBO at home, and I would
Cinemax.
get the. Well, we didn't. We had HBO, but I would get You'd get the monthly magazine, and I'd go through and look at all the ones with an N on it,
Yeah.
and figure out what the date was, and it would just be in the back of my mind that if I happen to stay up late that night, you know, and it wasn't even like. I wasn't like overtly planning, but I was planning.
Exactly.
You know, and we're just wired that way.
Yep.
So you take as much of that away as possible. That will help you from tripping up. And then it's like, why am I doing this?
Well, and that's
You know?
part of what that accountability.
Yeah.
If it just is confession, and if it's just sorrow, then it falls short of what its intention.
Right.
Because accountability communicates with one another. Okay, so your struggle times are Thursday nights from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning. So what's your battle plan for that section of time?
Right.
What's your battle plan in the springtime when you're supposed to be at war? Where are you going to be?
Right.
And that's what we're going to talk about accountability. It's not about whether or not you masturbated or whether or not you watched porn.
Right.
It's about where you were supposed to be and what was your plan going into those moments.
Well, I would say, one of the verses that we're going to kind of use as our proverb today is not actually from Proverbs, but it's from Job. Dan, you want to share that?
Yeah, it's Job 31:1. This is a
Is this
commitment.
the covenant?
A covenant, yep. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a girl. And that's that decision that
is.
you mentioned first.
Exactly.
It starts there. It starts there.
And I think that this is the part where you were talking about rewiring, and this is a really important thing, because I know that guys think, well, I can't avoid it. I mean, it's everywhere. It's billboards. It's it's everything that I see almost anymore. Every magazine, whatever. And so it is true. But I know, go back to the old standard, and that's Every Man's Battle, and they teach the principle of bouncing your eyes.
That's in the first chapter.
And I loved that, because it was so helpful to me, even just the idea of that. And I remember one of my accountability partner and I would intentionally, because it could be February and a gal could be in layer upon layer of clothes and a parka on top of that, and I would still be trying to figure out, her shape and her form and whatever. And so, that's how bad it was, in my own life. And so, training your eyes to look away. Me and my accountability partner, we got into determining what kind of shoes a woman was wearing. And so we'd be like, sometimes our discussion would be like, yeah, I saw 3 Reeboks, 2 Nikes, and high heels. And so, it helped us, because we would move our eyes down to a place. No, we did not have a foot fetish, but we would move our eyes down to a place where we
So bad.
we genuinely wanted to avoid.
Yeah. You were
getting
distracting
ourselves-
yourself.
Yeah, we were.
On
We
tension.
were distracting
Or intention.
ourselves, because we wanted to take our eyes away from that thing, because it doesn't take much. I mean, genuinely, it doesn't take much. You don't even have to see a whole lot to have your mind linger on it, even after your eyes are away from it. So, we retrained our eyes. We bounced them away from things on purpose. And that's that whole kind of rechanneling those things that have been kind of grooved into your brain. You're rechanneling new paths now
Right.
for your brain. It's muscle memory. You're making yourself look at things differently now.
Well, and for me, I think that the result has been watching the benefit of the war and the victory in the battle be a blessing to my children, be a blessing to my sons and to my daughters, and being transparent about those failures, being transparent about the struggle, being raw even at times with it, and so it's just I have some, we've seen some victory with our sons and with our daughters in this area that we don't see in the culture, and that's kind of the exciting part, is it's working.
Mm-hmm.
It's working. And not that we aim for perfection today, but we aim for progress today, for perfection for tomorrow.
So I've got we'll just real quick kind of run through. This is from the website XXXchurch.com. 5 most common struggles of porn users.
Oh, yeah. I saw that today, too.
Did you see that?
I did. Seriously good.
Just your thoughts. Number 1, porn users struggle with loneliness.
Amen.
Yes.
You have
Guys that just
Because
feel
no
like,
one knows you.
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
I'm living this double life.
Yeah.
If people really knew who I really was, they wouldn't
wouldn't
hate
accept me.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and so that kind of keeps them isolated, and it just that shame, that
Because you have
feeling
to wear a
of
mask.
grossness. That's what it does. Is it kind of drives them back into it, because it's like, well, I'm never going to escape anyways. I'm
Yeah.
always going to be this way. I'm this terrible monster. So they.
not the only one.
Yeah, and so that definitely is true.
Well, think about what happened with the first sin, right? So when Adam and Eve sinned, it says when they heard the sound of the Lord coming in the cool of the morning, what'd they do? What was the very first thing they did?
They hid. They ran and hid.
What did they do first?
What was it that they felt shame?
They sewed fig leaves
Okay, I gotta
together
look that up.
and covered their nakedness, right? So they covered themselves, and after they covered themselves, then they went into further hiding. And that's what sin does. It has this illusion of great, grandiose expression, excitement, etc. But what it does is it causes hiding, and then it causes further retreat.
Okay.
And that's what sin does to all of us. But so yeah, of course it's loneliness.
So here's number 2. Porn users struggle with a warped worldview. The fact that any moment, any scene, anything you're a part of can turn into a sexual conquest, basically. You know.
Yeah, and it teaches you, that women are objects and that sex is all about you.
I will say this.
Uh-huh.
In the context of being married and loving your wife, my wife is very annoyed with me at times. Because she's like, how can you possibly want to think about something like that when all we're doing is
every
like
48 hours. It says it in the book. Every young man's battle, every man's battle. Wives, read that chapter because it tells you why. Our testosterone's reproducing. Our sperms are reproducing every 48 hours.
So in the context of married life, every scene can become a sexual conquest. But not
and
when
it
you're
should
at
be
work.
celebrated.
Exactly.
You should serenade every room in your house.
Oh, baby, loading up that dishwasher.
Well,
you look
and the
so
cool
good.
thing about the conversation and what the result has done in our home is our kids kind of celebrate it. That they know that dad's going to grab mom when she walks by, and they just kind of roll their eyes. My son 2 years ago, we're sitting. His bedroom was downstairs at that point, and and we were kind of fooling around and joking about sex one night, and right before he went to bed, Joe says, "Hey, Mom, could you kind of keep it down? I'm trying to get some sleep."
Man.
That doesn't happen in every home, but it happened in our home, and I was like, high five, and Joe's giving me a high five across the room. And Mandy is just chuckling and rolling her eyes because it's normal. It's okay. It's celebrated.
Yeah,
Sex is
yeah.
a good thing.
I think I'm turning red for you.
I hope Mandy watches this.
Okay, number 3, porn users struggle with anxiety.
Oh, definitely.
For sure, because they're afraid of getting caught and exposed.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's, guys that I know that have struggled with this and I've ministered to, some of them in very high profile positions, some of them very, they're risking everything, careers and families and whatever to try to satisfy that lust, and that's
Then every once in a while, something hits the news, where some high-profile dude gets, has child pornography or something, and they're going to jail, which they should, there would be some anxiety, I suppose, especially as more decrepit as you get in things. Number 4, porn users struggle with a diminished sex life.
Yes, we
talked
about that already, but yeah, that's very true. And not only that, I don't know if number 5 is going to address this or not, but it also is something of diminishing returns, and something I would encourage everybody to look up on YouTube is James Dobson's interview with Ted
Bundy?
Bundy.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I remember
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Back in the 80s, and he interviewed him before he was to be executed, and one of the things that Ted Bundy describes is the fact that he started just by looking at images, and then it moved to video, and then it moved to peeping in windows, and then it moved to actually getting a prostitute, and then it moved beyond that to hurting the prostitute, and whatever. And so it was this law of diminishing returns that every time he felt like he was satisfying that lust, it couldn't be satisfied, and so he had to up the game.
Right.
And that's what it does.
And it's an evolution, and that's what's happened. Actually, one of the interesting stats that a lot of people don't know is most anthropologists believe that the decline in our culture on this issue began in the 30s, because before that we were a Victorian society. But in 1930s, in that decade, there was, I think it was Indiana University that had decided to launch a class for married couples about sex. And there was a professor there that was a research just hound, and all he could do was he just wanted to explore. And so his name was Alfred Kinsey. He began the Kinsey Institute. In his very first class, he drew rudimentary drawings of the vagina and the penis, and here's what sex is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He started to interview inmates about their sexual exploitations and experiences, even homosexuals, and it just continued to kind of delude down. The very next year, he had a senior, if I'm not mistaken, who approached him and said, "Hey, these are great. Let me give you real life pictures. Would you mind?" In in the light of research, in the view of research, let me just give you some real pictures of real people. Oh, that'd be wonderful. Do you know who that student was?
Hugh Hefner?
Hugh Hefner.
Hmm.
Yeah. And all you have to do is go back 70, 80 years in our history, and you could see the evolution of porn.
And his goal was to change
Yes.
America.
Yes, it was.
Sexually. So
So anyway, that's some
Hugh.
cool history that a lot of people don't know.
interesting. Here's the last one, and it kind of we kind of overshadowed this or cover this too. Porn users struggle with shame.
Yeah.
So, yeah, most definitely.
So
Yeah.
I keep coming back to the verse with Cain and Abel too.
Mhm.
God approached Cain when his countenance fell. And he
Mm.
says, "Be careful, Cain. Sin is crouching at your door, waiting on you."
Mm-hmm.
And there are men who are listening to this broadcast right now, and they know. I mean, there's no hiding anymore. Sin's no longer crouching in the doorway; it's standing in the doorway. When the decision is ours, what are we going to do with it?
In the book of Numbers, Moses said that be sure that your sin will find you out. And it's kind of like the law of physics. I mean, you throw a ball up in the air, it will come down.
Right.
And if you try to keep your sin hidden, it will come out at some point.
Right.
And so that's just the way that God has kind of wired the system. And so you can live, even for a long season, you can live in this sinful deceit and keep everyone fooled, but at some point, it's going to come out. And
Right.
It's better if you choose when.
And
if you confess it.
Is it James that says it's the evil within us that sparks the sin, in the fire, and this goes back to so let's get purge it out of our lives. Let's get that evil out of our lives with the mental decisions, with accountability, with being proactive. I'd encourage people to take that 30-day challenge.
Well,
Do you know, is that a normal thing, or is that happening right now?
once you sign up, it's a renewal.
So anybody,
30-day
anytime,
challenge.
like if they're listening to this in 6 months,
Yeah,
it's probably
they
still
can
happening.
redo it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a help. If that's a first step, kind of. If you don't know anybody you can trust with accountability, that's at least it's a virtual accountability.
And I would also suggest too that you celebrate the small victories, right?
Mhm.
Don't try to just jump to the top of the mountaintop and all right, I'm going to eradicate all porn. I mean, that's obviously the goal. We hope that you do.
Yeah.
But celebrate the victory. If you've not gone 24 hours without viewing porn, if you've not gone a week, without masturbating, set some goals. Set some realistic goals for you. Don't just say never going to do it again. That's unrealistic.
Is it like the Alcoholics Anonymous type thing of today?
Just today.
Today.
Yeah.
And you put 300 of those together, wow, that's a lot of todays. But
Right.
I'm worried about today
Mm-hmm.
rather than 10 years from now. Right now. Right this moment, it's not going to happen.
Right.
Last thoughts? Anything?
I just want to encourage the guys that are watching this, and even the gals that are married that might be watching this too. That there is hope, there's help, and men, you can get out of this struggle. You really truly can. It's not something that you could ever say, that I won't ever struggle with this again. Because even to this day, if I let my guard down, I would still be, I think, trapped in bondage.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I remember one of the illustrations that I think is one of the most powerful illustrations, and I'm going back to Every Man's Battle, but that was, you put a skinny little 4-year-old kid in the ring with a sumo wrestler that's 450 pounds. That kid's going to get bounced out of that ring every single time. But you starve the sumo, and after a week, the sumo is going to be struggling if he's not ate anything. After 2 weeks, after a month, even a 4-year-old can push that sucker out of the ring. And so the point is you starve those things that you're feeding in that appetite of lust in your life. If you
Right.
continue to do that, the longer you do that, the weaker the hold it will have on your life.
And as you celebrate those small little victories that we're talking about, those become your guardrails that now what you thought was impossible now is just absolutely, I'm not going to compromise this line anymore. And then you just extend your guardrails. And that's a powerful principle is starve the sumo, starve the battle. And after you've starved the battle, those small victories become your margins, your new margins, those new victory points, and you're going to be pissed off because you messed that up, not where you're at today.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thanks, guys.
Wait, one more thing. You had asked about other thoughts and
Right.
references. If you're a wife and your husband's struggling with this, or you believe that your husband's struggling with this, there's also help for you. And I know that was mentioned, but specifically where Triple X Church, I just saw on today's website that they are hosting a conference for spouses who their mates are struggling in this arena and they don't know what to do. So check out triplexchurch.com. They'll have a reference point for you. I believe it's in California, so I don't. That might be something too. But
So let's address that in a second. And this
Okay.
is a dude's show, but,
Sure.
but women tend to not understand, right? What do you say? What do you say to the wives?
it's hard to understand. But I also, 1 out of 3 women view porn regularly. So some of these applications that we're talking about for men will apply and will cross over to women.
Mhm.
So I don't want to just give this generalization that, this is just a guy's talk. No, this is
Right.
actually something that
Becoming
could be
more and
beneficial
more.
for women too.
Yeah.
And part of that is the battle plan from Satan to us is very strategically different, right? For us, we're visually driven. For the female, they're relationally or emotionally driven. And so it speaks to the insecurity. So you really have 2 different conversation points at that level. But to the wife that might not understand, there are call Mike's wife. She understands.
What I would say is that you need to, you need to look at this, because the tendency I think that most women have is to probably scream or yell at or beat up. I don't mean physically, but just kind of
Sure.
browbeat their husband in a sense. And how dare you? How could you? And what? That's that's not helpful. If that's your tendency, you need to kind of temper that response. I would say first off, pray. Ask the Lord to guide you and direct you, and then have a compassionate approach with your husband where you can sit down and just start to talk to him. Listen, you haven't brought this out to me, but I know and I highly suspect that this is going on, and I want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how we can do that. And then start laying out some of these practical steps that we, don't let me have your cell phone and let me just see it anytime I ask. Let me take a peek, and have the husband be an open book, and you should be.
But
guys.
don't force that either.
Yeah,
that
but
can be detrimental in the
I
relationship.
really believe that for the woman to kind of sit down rationally and to talk this out, to genuinely try to help him out of this struggle would be a really good thing, especially if you're suspecting that it's there. But you broaching the subject, not in a way where you're coming with a machete, but you're coming in love, and you're trying to help your husband out of this swamp. And there's going to be some time there where you're going to have to clean the mud off and pick the leeches off of him. But you can go to victory if that's your approach.
Your marriage can be healthier and stronger. You may seem like it's a disaster right now, but if you do go through this together, because they feel used, they feel cheapened, they feel betrayed. Those are honest, real, raw
Absolutely.
emotions, and they don't get it where the guy wasn't thinking any of that. He just wanted to see something. He had a moment of weakness or whatever, but he crossed lines. So we can go forever on this.
And we've kind of dabbled around this, but we haven't brought up why viewing pornography for a man is like an adulterous thing, an adulterous act for a woman. Jesus himself said that,
Right,
Matthew 5:28.
right.
If you are hungering for ham and eggs in the morning, C.S. Lewis said, you've already committed breakfast in your heart. And
Nice.
that's
I
the
heard that one.
reality.
Yeah.
If you look at a woman lustfully with your eyes, you've already committed adultery in your heart. And that's the reality. So we that's how most women frankly view this issue, is that you're committing adultery.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no
Right.
reason
It's
for
legit,
them not
yeah.
to.
Right,
Yeah.
and it isn't just an emotion. I mean, Jesus Christ himself said, yeah, she's right. So,
To piggyback to, my wife actually read Every Man's Battle, and for her that was a defining moment in our relationship, so she could kind of start to understand some of the scientific explanations behind the struggle, and not just scientific, but even just the spiritual applications of that. So surround yourself with resources, surround yourself with accountability, continue to pray like Mike has said and suggested, but don't think that you're alone in this struggle either. And you can choose to expose your husband and leave him alone in his time of need, or you can choose to come alongside your husband and help him find victory, which I think you desperately want him to have, so that he could be the man that you want him to be. So, anyway, thanks for listening. What are we talking about next week?
I think it's raising godly girls, isn't it?
That'll be, that sounds great. So.
Or I don't know. We skipped that one. We'll figure that out. The Roman conference.
Yes. Roman is going to be on March 17th, 2017 at Rising Sun Church of Christ.
Pretty
And
excited.
So I'm really, really jazzed about it. Go to realmeniowa.org. Check out the website. Registrations aren't going to open up until sometime in December, but it's getting close because we're in November, and so I'm super jazzed about T.C. Stallings is our keynote speaker this year. Our worship is going to be by Jeff Arundel and band, and Jeff's a great guy.
They're
You know,
solid.
Was he from Lord of the Rings? Arundel?
Yes. No.
No. Anyways, T.C. Stallings is, if you do not know who that is, go to the website. You'll see who he is. But he was the lead actor in the movie War Room. If you've seen that movie, he was also in the movie Courageous. He's a great guy. His physique is kind of like mine.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean.
I always, yeah.
I
That's what I
confuse
saw.
the two of you often.
I know.
Yeah.
So anyways.
All right.
that's,
Sarcasm, a spiritual gift by Michael Mastis.
Here's the deal. If you're struggling with pornography, do something. Make movement. Don't just watch this and think, yeah, I need to do something. Take action now. We'll see you next time. This is Real Men Iowa Radio.